Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to our formal opening keynote for the 2014 School Leadership Summit. Eric Shandinger provided us with a pre-conference keynote last night. We were so appreciative of that. Our thoughts are with Dr. Bill Brandon, who had a family emergency and could not present. We miss him. Right now, I'd like to bring Jason Borgen and Roland Baker on, who are going to introduce TCAL's role in the conference and give you a conference welcome.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm going to go ahead and, I'm Jason Borgen, Program Director of the TCAL project, and I'm going to go ahead and give the microphone over here to my wonderful colleague, the Executive Director of the TCAL project.
Wide training initiative. It has a portal with thousands of resources there to help school and district leaders. And if you have a chance, you can see on your screen right now what the portal looks like. You can peruse and see everything from one-to-one initiatives to 21st century skills, cyber safety, latest professional development coming up for administrators, all kinds of wonderful things to help you in moving forward with the important role we have of leadership in the 21st century. We not only have a portal, we have a cadre that works with us in different states that are leaders down in the trenches that help us keep our finger on the pulse and make sure that we're preparing items that we really need to help us. Right now in front of us is the Common Core. That's very, very important for California and the U.S., so that's taking up a lot of our time for those of us in schools. And it also, we have lots of resources to help schools and districts as they move through that implementation here in the United States. As we talked about, and we were just showing you where our cadre members live throughout a few different states, we also have a leadership training program, a certification for folks that we offer through TCAL. It's an online training program where you can become certified. It's called Leading Edge Certification. It's a nationally recognized certification. You can get it as a school or district leader. You can receive it as a teacher in blended online learning and several other items. We specifically are going to be, or we have started, a cadre that's moving through right now in the certification program. If you're interested, please contact us and we'll make sure you get advice. We're going to have another cohort starting up fairly soon. The price coming in here in California is $749 per participant, but that fluctuates depending upon location and different items that are needed and how many are attending. So once again, we want to thank you for participating in this exciting professional development. We're looking forward to an absolutely outstanding day and want to take just a minute to thank Steve Hargadon for his skill set that he has put forward to help immensely in this professional development initiative. So welcome, and at this point I'll turn it over to Steve, and we'll see how we're doing getting ready for our important keynote.
Thank you, Roland, and thanks, Jason. So Ira, I still don't have the link to the slides, so I'm going to do a quick thank you to our conference partners and sponsors, and then we'll keep this exciting by letting you watch us on the fly get ready. So again, thanks to TCAL, and thanks this year to AXA for Conference Strand and their support, and to Larry Wilson at Wilson Consulting for making this free event possible. This is a chance for those of you participating to let us know where you are participating from. Look to the left of the slides. You're looking for the star icon. It's the second one down. Click on it twice, and then you can click on the slide. You can indicate the time where you are, the temperature, anything else you would like to let us know. So far, we're a North America-centric audience.
Steve, I just sent you the link to the Google Slides, and if you get those first, or I can share the screen when we get up to that, either one.
It looks like I just got it. So let me do a little playing here while people indicate where they're from. And I'm almost there. So what's going to happen, folks, is if the slides convert correctly, and I think they will, then it will take a second for them to download to your individual computers. They'll come through in the session. And so if for some reason they get to a topic point and the slide hasn't shown up yet, it should very shortly appear on your computer screen. And let's see how we're doing here. How are the two of you? I'm not hearing by your side of Pam. There you go.
Are we there?
We're very close. How's that?
Oh.
It might take a second for the slides to download to your individual computers. We see two of Pam. Are you twins?
I'm Ira side by side, as we often are when we're working together. And there's nothing any better than having a co-note for me as compared to a keynote, which will allow us to work together. So I'm on one computer, he's on the other, but we're talking to one through one so that our sound doesn't reverberate.
Well, you sound great, so go right ahead. We're ready for you.
All right, wonderful. What we're going to be talking about today, we're really excited about the concept that as we've been working to really infuse maker education across our school district, 26 schools, really trying to get back to what we consider to be natural learning, where children are able to play, make, design, build, engineer, tie that to their stories, to the work that they're doing in school, but to really restore a sense of passion both with our teacher educators as well as with our young people. That one of the things that we've discovered is the idea that we're not just making makers, but we're also making leaders, and that leadership is something that transcends what we typically have seen as a more bureaucratic sort of scientifically managed style of leadership, and really looking at that leadership is everywhere and anywhere in our schools, and that when you take advantage of how you connect the grassroots, that all of a sudden you start to see a very different style of leadership develop. So I think, Ira, you're going to take us a little bit deeper into this concept of making maker leaders.
Well, you know, we talk about wanting our students as they approach life in the mid to late 21st century to be makers, not just consumers. We want them to know how to solve problems, to be inventive in every way, to not follow the rules as it is, but to, you know, to look at what new rules will be. In order to do that, we need to liberate students, and thus we need to liberate educators. And, you know, we're trying to do that in a wide range of ways, because what we really think is that, you know, our goal is to create opportunities, to create, to close the opportunity gap, but to create every possible opportunity for every possible student. As we say, our strategic plan here is unleashing each student's potential. In order to do that, we have to unleash every educator's potential and create, a sense of agency throughout every level of our school system.
And I would note that we've just had Michael Thornton join us in the chat room. Michael is in one of the schools that we're going to talk about today as more of a case study on what happens when you start to move out of that hierarchy and really focus on the idea that there is leadership all over a school, and that when you start out with the idea that you're going to multiply the talents and strengths of everybody within a school, both students as well as teachers, as well as administrators, parents, whether it's cafeteria workers or bus drivers or whoever it is that touches young people, that suddenly you start to have an incredible wealth of experience and expertise that helps to influence the work that you are really aiming to do that's worthy for young people to do. And that changes the game so that it isn't dependent upon experience. It's more dependent upon people who have a real sense of expertise. It's also not dependent upon title or position. So one of the things that I'll tell you is that as a superintendent, I've really worked hard to try to flatten that hierarchy, to really go after making sure that what we're doing is not blocking people, diminishing the talents and skill sets of people across the system, but really elevating that. I'd love, Michael, if you're in the chat room, for you to be able to comment some on how you've seen that unfold for you as a young leader who has emerged in a school.
And we have a number of our, Albemarle County pedagogical entrepreneurs, as we call them, boundary spanning, globally networking people who have changed the game in their schools. We have Joan Aykroyd is in the chat room. I see Erica Thorson is in the chat room. I think May Craddock's in the chat room. So you can connect with these people. I'll just add that I saw in the chat room pop up. We will make, the link to this Google presentation available to everyone here before the time is over. But we like to look at this from a leadership point of view as to how we enable people, and from everything from eliminating policies which enable change, not block change, to the whole sense that we look to our teachers and everyone in our school to be inventors and to be sort of marketers of their invention, so that so they spread the ideas virally through their schools. We think this is really vitally important, that change is never effectively driven down from the top. It just doesn't work that way. It can't happen, and we need a better way.
And so I would add that when you look at ones such as policies that enable rapid change, an example of that is that one of our key leaders in our central suite of staff members, Becky Fisher, set out years ago to make sure that we were not over-filtering our network system so that our kids and our teachers would have access to all kinds of ways to connect with educators as well as other students as well as experts around the world. So our kids have had access to YouTube, our educators use Twitter. That one of the things that we've done is to really try to say, how do we get beyond the walls of our schools, the boundaries of our school district, so that we can cross-pollinate ideas, resources, questions, and really build out the kind of work we do. And we think as we do that, what we're doing is making connections that allow our young people as well as our educators to really maximize potential.
One of the things we'd like you to do now in the chat room is to tell us what Leadership for Change looks like in your school, so that we can sort of collect examples from you of what's going on. We really look at what the role of students is, the role of teachers, the role of principals. I remember last year one of our principals talking about the chats he does on the morning news at his school every Friday and saying, I just talked about stuff and then watch the Twitter feed blow up, which is not a line you'd hear a lot of principals in America say, that they encourage students to tweet to him and to tweet to each other all the time. Michael Thornton just sent me a link today of his students walking the streets of London effectively via YouTube. We have students, changing the game in terms of technology through all sorts of ways, including the Genius bars at our secondary school as they act as invention stations. So what does leadership look like in your school? If you can give us that feedback, we can bring that into the conversation. But we want to move to the first of our, three sort of discussions about change. And we want to start with high school libraries and begin with one in particular. How did two librarians dare to transform a high school library that was steeped in tradition into a contemporary youth media space? And I will say that if you walk into this high school library, and we'll start looking at a couple of images here, you will see as many students as you can imagine filling the space. They will go over 120,000 student visits to their library this year in a school of about 1,200 students. And so you think about that as one of the things. This library is no longer a supermarket where people pick up things, but is fully a kitchen where invention happens every day. And one of the things that we see most strongly in this, first, we believe that libraries are the learning core of our schools, that this is the sort of central park and downtown of education. But what's been key then is if that's true, if libraries are that important to us, and we think they are, how do libraries engage in disruptive innovation that changes the marketplace, that captures a new audience, and that involves everyone in the school?
Well, and I will say that one of the things that I find really profoundly interesting about the work that both May Craddock and Joan Ackroyd have done in their library at Monticello High School, but also Erica Thorson, who's on board, is doing that work with our partner librarian at Albemarle High School this year, is that when librarians start to redefine their role and redefine what it is that kids can do and might do and see how they can unleash that potential, it definitely leads to what Ira's talking about, which is a disruptive innovation. These women have captured in their library, along with leadership from a lot of other people in their school, a population of kids that in many cases would have never maybe walked into a library unless somebody made them. In fact, one of the things that Joan told me the first year, 4 years ago, when they started this conversion, one of their biggest problems was having kids cut class to go to the library. What librarian wouldn't want that problem in this day and age?
And we had an interesting thing at Erica's library at Albemarle High School this year where she has increased circulation over 6 times from last year after a conversion. We had one of our alumni association leaders in the library. His grandson came in and said as a senior this was the first year he'd ever been in the library. That's the trick about disruptive innovation, capturing new markets and altering what's going on. Someone in the chat room just said the term library is very pre-digital. And in a way that's true, except I like to go back to the root of the word library, which goes back to the very earliest sort of levels of language. And the term means to peel. And so it used to mean that you peeled bark apart and you wrote on it. But now to me it means you peel open the world. And I think we can stick with the word and sort of redefine it. Some of the things that they introduced into the library, step by step, over the last 3.5 years, are a music studio, a poet's cafe, a glass room, which is a quieter space that needs no quiet signs. Students just understand it. It's really good design. A game zone for gamers, players, and game inventors. A maker space that's kind of messy, that has everything from 3D printers to sewing machines, to lots of hand tools and lots of ways of dealing with paper. A hacker space that's sort of a clean maker space where kids play with coding and many other things. That's a place where people put things together. We have a fireplace in there. It's not gas or wood because Pam wouldn't let me do that. but it's electric, and the principal now plans to have fireside chats there with students. And we have a Genius Bar, which as our one-to-one computers have gotten more dependable, is now spending a great deal of time inventing with 3D scanning and 3D printing. So, you know, all of those things have built out places for everyone.
And I think that one of the really key points is, how do you get something like this started? And it was really interesting to me because when you first came to Albemarle, one of the first groups that is and I made that challenge to you, okay, you're sitting in Michigan, come walk and talk Albemarle schools with me, and you did. But we happened to have a pivotal time with some librarians on, interestingly enough, a snow day not too many years ago. And Joan and you started to build a connectivity. One of the things that I think is so key in that concept of the maker leader is that Joan had ideas that she was really interested in pursuing. And rather than looking at things that she was talking about and saying, no, that won't work, no, we can't afford that, no, that's not something that we can do, yeah, but maybe, maybe in a few years we might be able to think about that. One of the things that I think that we have is a system where people who have the positional power to say, let's turn the talent loose, let's look at that multiplying effect versus diminishing effect, that what we do is we say, rather than no, how do we get to yes? And so when Joan's ideas started to really turn in her mind, and she connected with Ira, one of the things that we started to do was to say, how is it that we can support this with Joan as a leader of this work, not really close her down and say that's really not going to happen. And what I've seen is absolutely a blossoming of leadership as a result of Joan's work. She's influenced not just librarians across our system, along with people like Melissa Techman and Erica Thornton, but she's also influenced librarians outside of our school district and even touched people across the United States with the work that she's doing.
But, the big part, as Pam says, is getting to yes on everything. Yes, Joan's first question was, can we do a music studio in an old storeroom? We found old equipment. We had a way of making it happen. I don't want to go too fast through the slides. When she talked about having a hacker space, we reallocated a little money and we found a way to do it with old furniture, new furniture, and some paint. When she said last summer to me, I'd like to show movies in the library, how do I do that? We went out and did a hard Google search and found a Bluetooth headset system so that students who wanted to watch the movies and listen to it could watch the movies and listen to it. And now May and Joan, show whatever, whether it's the Olympics or NCAA basketball games or Nelson Mandela's funeral or YouTube of Seamus Haney when he died. Whatever they do, they're engaging kids with that. So a big part of it is getting to yes. And both Joan and May's principal and Erica's principal said to me a couple of weeks ago, our goal is to make our schools function like these libraries are functioning now. That's leadership that's seeing what kids need and what kids are attracted to and are going with it.
Now, Ira, I think there's a story we have to tell here before we get to this one, and that is that the story of how great ideas go viral, that the work that was going on in the library sort of caught on around the whole idea of the hacker movement, not just the maker movement, but how kids are able to actually build and create with technologies beyond just their hands-on work that we see so vividly in some of our mechatronics labs. But it struck me that we had the story of, we put that challenge out at the beginning of the year, can you make an app for your school? And in this school, we had a student that actually took that challenge as a result of, I think, kind of connecting around that hacker idea. Maybe you could share that just briefly.
Well, we put out a series of tech challenges at the beginning of the year to our students, and we said, can you make an Android app for your school? Can you make a Scratch game or a Scratch to Connect game for your school? Can you do various things? And one of the students saw the poster and went to one of our CTE teachers and said, I want to do this. And the CTE teacher said, I have no idea how, but let's figure it out. We had provided some links to support this, but the student found that those didn't work well enough for them, so he found better links. And he built an app for the school, which, I have on my phone and is wonderful. But when that student did that, he inspired a bunch of other students who were part of something called the Monticello Weather Center that includes everybody from special ed students to, a whole range of people. And they built a Weather Center app. I have both of these on my phone now. It's quite remarkable. As I told our school board, you don't have any idea what students can do until you ask them what they can do.
So we have that wonderful music studio in that library, and it's amazing to me every time I go in, and we'll put some links out. But one of the most fabulous things that you can see are kids that are taking ownership for their own learning. They're not just engaged in learning because somebody built that for them to do, but they're empowered to really own their own learning, to be invested learners. And you see that when you go into a music studio and you see kids that are taking AP courses and kids that are perhaps a little more challenged in terms of literacy skills in high school, all working together to create music, to write lyrics, to produce music, to perform music, and basically even to sometimes take it out there and turn it into their own entrepreneurial work as musicians, whether it's on YouTube or in some of our local music venues.
And one of the things is we believe this is a K-12 experience. And, it builds across everything. We're about to start talking about an elementary school that includes Michael Thornton. Erica Thorson used to work there. I think we may have a couple of other people that are involved. One of the things about this music studio at Monticello High School, which is a completely different feeder pattern from the elementary school we're going to talk about, is they've worked together. Last year, the music kids worked with kindergartners at Meriwether Lewis Elementary, completely different area, completely different socioeconomics, to rap nursery rhymes that the kids wanted to hear. It was fabulous connectivity.
Ruth Goldberg
stuff. We've done things all across that connect people because we think this is something that happens across every grade. It happens for every student. If it doesn't, we're failing. And so what we're going to talk about next is an elementary staff that really leapt on these changes and sort of how that happened, how they've transformed their school.
All right. So one of the things that I would love to say is that this school has always been a fabulous school in terms of the capability of teachers to really make interesting work occur with kids. But what I have seen at Meriwether Lewis Elementary, which is a school that we're featuring here, is that as teachers discovered a bigger network of professional learning community than just what they had in their own school or even maybe with teachers in other schools in our school district, as we saw teachers start to become part of a bigger professional learning network inside social media, that one of the things that started to change was their definition of what learning community meant, not just for themselves but for the young people that they work with. And so I think that Michael Thornton was probably the first teacher in the school that jumped into Twitter. We had used an internal sort of Twitter-like community called Yammer that was more self-contained, kind of the idea of inside the city walls. But all of a sudden we had people like Michael in the school that he took the step out as an explorer to find out what's out there in the bigger world. What he started to do was to connect other teachers out there with him to that bigger world. And all of a sudden, we had a school that really went viral in using all kinds of different tool sets to take their kids to other worlds as well as to bring other worlds into the school. And so one of the things that I would describe this school as being is a real hotbed of pedagogical entrepreneurship. In many ways, they're almost like an innovation zone or what you might call an incubator that has really had influence across our entire school district. So we saw them as early adopters, early social media users, and again, that goes back to decisions that we made to say, we're not going to have this bureaucratic control mechanism, command and control over our teachers' access to the world by limiting the kinds of things that they can get to and get their kids to through social media. So one of the things that we saw in this school was that the specialists became incredibly important. And as the teachers became more empowered and engaged in the work that they were doing, We also believe that that started to have incredible influence on their viewpoint about bringing their kids into the mix in terms of that same level of empowerment. One of the things that this school did was to take the risk to ask all of the students in the school, or most all of the students in the school, on one day 3 years ago to gather throughout the day, and we ran a design thinking charrette with kids, elementary kids, facilitated by the specialists as well as some of the teachers and the principal of the school. And basically what they did was they said to kids, if you could create the school of your dreams, what kinds of things would you do here? That was a really interesting piece that set some things in motion in terms of changing learning spaces in the school, connecting up for everything from the cafeteria has been transformed to playgrounds, to teachers now asking, what would it look like if we actually changed the way we even think about rules related to using playgrounds and spaces? But the library was key in that shift. Physical education teachers were key in that shift. Classroom teachers, music, art, the principal, the assistant principal, the parent community. But most importantly, what we learned was that when you give even elementary kids, and some people think, what would an elementary kid say that informs that idea of design thinking? What we learned is that our elementary kids had a lot to say and developed a real sense of agency that led one of those kids recently, Ira, when we had a private school visitor from out of state in this school, one of the kids said sort of spontaneously to a teacher,
kids design everything here, which is, may not be true, but they believe that, and they have an ownership of their school that we absolutely love. We watch this grow, and a big part of what, and we'll get to this a little later, but, I think of central office's role was to give permission to teachers with fabulous ideas. When I first met Michael and Erica at this school, the biggest thing I did was say, go ahead. Michael said, I want to get these chairs out of the room. I want kids to be able to write on the, write in more places. And I said, get the chairs out of the room and have the kids write on the floor. That's all fine. I said to Erica, throw the adult-sized tables out of the library. It was just giving permission to great ideas. That is such a critical thing. And that allows teachers to let the kids make decisions. I mean, you're seeing one of Michael's kids here. They just want every place to write and everything to do,
and build these spaces.
Right.
That's what's really cool.
Or take them over in different ways. I'm going to have trouble showing the videos we have here, but they'll be attached to the Google Doc, and I'll send that link out in just a few minutes. So, but you'll see kids doing everything. I think the key thing about this school, and sadly, I think a lot of schools miss this, is this school trusts in children and trusts in childhood.
And I think that Ira, that one of the things that was so critical about this work that's come from so many incredible leaders across the system at every level, from assistant superintendents to principals, to parent support, to teacher support, bringing in as many different voices as possible. I think that one of the things that was really critical about this is the idea that as we began to do that work and we learned what it is that kids could do, that we started to really reject many of the normative behaviors that have come with the whole test prep movement in the United States, that also I think is in place in some of the other places in the world, whether it's Australia or even England, in terms of the ways that people are moving towards that sort of objectifying everything, trying to measure everything people do with numbers. And one of the things that we said is that when you free learners and free those who support learners, what you start to get is a passion for learning that goes back. Somebody said something about libraries being more of, I think, what we call the Gutenberg way of learning. This really gets to both post-Gutenberg, which we call search, connect, communicate, make, but it also really gets back to pre-Gutenberg, to the natural ways that children learn through play, storytelling, building, designing, apprenticeships, learning from older people that they can aspire, perhaps their aspirational peers. All the things that you do to get kids really engaged and empowered to own their learning, that comes when teachers feel that same sense of empowerment. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do, is to take the lid off that, by putting the lid on some of the things such as the test prep driven world that so many educators live in today.
And I'll add that with this image in front of us, to quote Michael, because I think this is sort of important as a sense of where policy has to be and the trust in children. When Michael originally posted this picture, he pointed out that, you know, one student, as they're drawing on the tables here, was kneeling on the table. And he said that so often somebody will say, well, if you let one person kneel on the table, everybody will kneel on the table. But the fact is that's not true. Children make decisions for themselves at every age. They make logical decisions for themselves. You see one student is kneeling on the table, the others are not choosing to do that, and it all works out fine. They realized very quickly that they were all on the table. It wouldn't work particularly well for what they're doing. This is all about the trust, you know, the trust that has to go as part of this. And so that gives us a chance to move to changing the organization and talking about how our school district, our school division, as we call them in Virginia, you know, came to define itself through what we call our lifelong learning competencies, which is something that's 12 years old now, and defining our professional development as what we call 7 pathways to change what were factory schools into innovation zones. We think there were good factory schools, but there were factory schools, and factory schools make no sense in this time span. So how do we get to where this is a high school library and everybody is fine with this? Where this is a middle school English class and everybody's fine with it? Where, you know, we have Coder Dojo and activities like that going on all the time that are student controlled and student centered. What is it that, you know, that we had to do this work? And part of it is, and the link is right here for people to use it, is we began with, and this is 12 years ago, long before I was here, the notion of lifelong learner competencies, which our school board views as far more important than standardized tests. How will students prepare to live their lives well in their century? Not in the century teachers were born in, not in the century central administrators were born in, but in the lifetime that our students will lead. And there's been a 12-year commitment to that, which is, you know, which I think is a really critical part of this.
And I think that one of the most important things that came from this is, again, this came from design work. We were talking about design in 2002 when we put out a challenge to teachers to design up what we called 2004, Design 2004 projects, when teachers came back together to share those with each other and what they had learned from taking on more multidisciplinary, more tech-connected work. What they said was, we found that the work we were doing was so elevated above what Virginia fondly calls our SOLs, or standards of learning, not what you might think. And so as our teachers worked on that, they came up with these lifelong learning competencies, which, whether you look at the work of the Partnership for 21st Century Learning, or you look at perhaps some of the competencies associated with many of the national associations, that what you'll find is that what we're saying that we want our kids to be able to do really grounds the work of many national associations that are saying this is what we would expect kids to be like if they were really getting great social studies learning, great math learning, etc., except we see it much more connected in an interdisciplinary way. The other thing that I think is pretty critical is that, you know, we spend a lot of time in this country, in the United States, talking about workforce preparation. We really believe we're not just preparing kids to go to work, to become employers, to be entrepreneurs, but we also, most importantly, are preparing our kids to be members of communities, to be good family members, to be people who see themselves as lifelong learners, who will be open to that forevermore. So when we talk about lifelong learning competencies, we're really talking about the whole child focus, not just looking at preparing kids to go to work.
And one of the things that's part of that is, if something only exists in school, we have to wonder whether that's a logical thing. So the image in front of you now is what you'll see in our schools instead of computer labs, because computer labs have always really only existed in schools. It's a school solution that makes no sense in sort of training. We want our kids who are doing work to be comfortable, to be near each other if they want, or not near each other if they don't want. We want them to learn to create the spaces and the situations that make them comfortable and effective and efficient, if that's what they want to be. We want them to make decisions.
Now, Ira, I'll tell you that one of the things that I'm always challenged by is that, you know, when we show folks screens like this, one of the things I'm always looking for is, do I see the same thing on every screen?
Right.
And if you'll notice right here, you're seeing some different things that kids are maybe playing with whatever they're doing in this particular picture. But the most important thing is that we also really look at, our teachers were very loud and clear that they are not interested in having just one type of technology available to their kids, or even considering that everything has to be done using a device that's a contemporary device. So what we really look for is, how is it that our kids, as our maker leaders out there, our teachers, our principals, all of the folks that are really trying to create maker environments with kids in every school, how is it that both technology that's 20th century or 19th century or 21st century all has its place in that environment across the system? And I think that our pathways really speak to that.
Well, you know, we developed again out of teacher contributions. We ran a second design challenge last year called Design 2015, and asked every school to come up with something that was blocking them from achieving, you know, contemporary learning spaces and learning styles, and to give us a way we could help them break through that. When we looked at all those proposals, what we found was these 7 pathways, which we think of as the 7 pathways to the lifelong learning competencies. And the last picture you saw talks to one of them that's in the middle, choice and comfort. We want kids to figure out how to make themselves comfortable in life so that they can take care of themselves and can take care of others, and be effective members of community, their family, the workforce, whatever it is they want to be part of. But we also think, you know, that's one, but the 7 pathways, you know, touch on a bunch of things. As we said at the start, we want our kids to be makers, not just consumers. So maker-infused curriculum, where kids are producing all the time, and sharing that out with the world is essential. And that connects us to passion, problem, project-based learning. Our teachers said very clearly they didn't want to keep fighting with kids to do things the kids weren't interested in. They wanted to drive the curriculum through student interest. They wanted to be connected to the world. That's interactive technologies and connectivity. If you have computers and they're sitting in front of kids and every kid is on the same screen all the time, that's neither choice, nor is it an interaction in an effective way, nor is it connected to the world.
Absolutely, and I will tell you that one of the ones on here that for me is incredibly important is the concept of universal design for learning, because as we began to really play with, and most people think of UDL as being associated with what you do to make learning accessible for special education children. As we began to talk to our administrators and teachers, they began to point out to us that UDL is not just for kids that perhaps carry an IEP, but also for kids that for whatever reason need access to different tools or different strategies in order to be able to really be able to do the work that they need to do to be successful in whatever learning choices that they make. So one of the things that we've really tried to do is to really build into our pathways opportunities for teachers to learn, how do you make curriculum accessible for a kid that maybe just doesn't want to sit there and read the book, even though they're capable of reading it, but maybe what they would really prefer is to use a different kind of device to be able to get to what they need to learn. So it could be that those are kids that might want to access YouTube videos, or they might want to interview people, or they might want to listen to text, not just read it. And, you know, and I'll be the first to say, I want all of our kids to be literate, but I think that in this day and age that the whole concept of literacy, from being just able to decode print on a page, is something that's radically changing as a result of contemporary technologies. So we've built that in, and we call these pathways exploratory pathways, because we fully anticipate that as we continue to work, that we'll see these evolve based on feedback that we get from our teachers, all of whom we consider to be leaders, as well as from our students.
Well, and so the last one I'll talk about is instructional tolerance, because Patricia in the chat room just brought up the thing of, you know, silly rules that we fight with students about.
I mean, like cell phones, you know, I sometimes say cell phones are the equivalent to 1990s gum rules.
Right, and so we're BYOD in every grade from kindergarten up, and we pretty much gum chewing is allowed in the schools because why not? Right, mostly, and you know, we have kids eating and drinking in our libraries around their computers because, you know, one of the things that's amazing is kids notice that they're the only people not allowed to eat and drink around computers. Because, you know, if somebody spills something on a book or it got ruined in the rain, we get them a new book in the old days. We don't like to lose technology, and we haven't lost a lot of technology to damage, but the fact is that people have to live their lives around it. And we're not doing anything to make kids uncomfortable. That's a critical thing. If you're uncomfortable, this is always my return to Maslow's pyramid. If you're uncomfortable, whether it's because you're hungry or thirsty or the tag on your shirt is bothering you, all you're paying attention to is that discomfort. And so, you know, then you're not really learning. You're not focusing on what's happening in the school in a critical way. So, you know, we try to establish comfort at every level. We try to establish choice at every level. Michael has left the chat, but this was one of his favorite pictures in the top corner here. A kid who hated reading, but once he had invented his book holder, was perfectly happy with it, you know, to go at it. We like making to cover everything. We don't just like digital devices. We have a lot of 3D printers in our system now because they've been incredibly engaging to kids and done a lot of stuff for us. We find that girls jump on the 3D printing in a way that we haven't gotten girls always involved in tech in the same way.
But I do have to admit that Joan Ackroyd's sewing machine in her library has boys actually making their own bow ties for prom night.
And once girl, like the girl in this picture, jumped into 3D printing, when she had to go beyond that, there she is with a hacksaw working away. So it opens up all sorts of opportunities.
And I think that the story about the maker leaders behind this are the three people that were into labs that had been sort of traditional shop classes and said, what we want to do is to rewrite this curriculum and turn it into something that's more like a mechatronics lab. And boy, did that really change the game as they started to work on how do we really transform curriculum so that it is more contemporary, but realizing that kids learning to use tools that have been around for a very long time is a reality that we don't want to lose that either as a choice for kids.
Well, and that gets into, you know, the viral spread of big ideas and scaling across, not up. So when we had started with a group of 3 just very excited career tech teachers in our middle schools, and 2 of them were new to this field, one just out of grad school, one a former English teacher, but one of sort of experienced young teacher. They jumped on this in totally different ways and have transformed their schools by working with other teachers to bring the content together. The fact is, our 5 middle schools are all radically different from each other. You can't do the same thing at every school. It has to look different. It will never work if we try to do the same thing.
Absolutely, because when you've got 726 square miles with a tiny elementary school with 130 kids that's in a rural area, an urban ring elementary school with 700 kids, a high school that is sitting with 79 languages taught in it. One of the things that you know, and a charter high school that belongs to us that's very much a part of our public system that has close to 100 kids, the reality is what you want to do is to have your big ideas scale, not have your situation where you try to treat everybody the same and push programs into schools. So we've really seen that viral spread of ideas start to really take root, to fly across the system. And I have to tell you that in my many, many years in education, decades in education, that one of the things that I've always seen are school systems that try to adopt programs, and then 2 years later you're doing a new program, 2 years later you're doing a new program, because things just never take off and they fail. The reality is that I'm seeing, as a result of really going after work in a much more organic way, of really looking at the scale across idea, and really going after the multiplier effect and having that encouraged across the system, that suddenly we seem to have something that is taking root in a really deep way. And guess what? We're not really losing on the test score battle either. Our kids are actually in many ways doing better than they ever have. We had in the school, Jones School, 100% graduation rate of African American students this past year. And we believe that's because when kids are starting to see themselves as a part of the system and not having the system just do unto them, suddenly you have kids that you're grabbing into as clients, as people who are your customers, as people who are fully participating in the educational process. And that's the whole definition of disruptive innovation, is suddenly you've got people who are a part of using what you're doing that never before ever did. And that's happening in libraries, classrooms, gyms, cafeterias, all over.
As we start to wrap up here, you know, I want to focus on a couple of things again that are important. One is trusting children, and the other is learning how to say yes. So here we have a student, a middle school student, an 8th grader, working on an incredible project where they began from a Google book of the 1845 book on how to develop a telegraph by Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail. They followed that book along with their physics teacher, their engineering teacher, their math teacher, their history teacher, looking at what this was. They followed along, figuring out electricity and the physics of it sort of with Vail and Morse as they went along. And then using 3D printing technology, printed this out, wound the wire around it, figured out how a relay really worked with a deep understanding of it, and did such an amazing job that they ended up presenting it at the Smithsonian Institution. This stemmed from nobody in central office. It stemmed from teachers wanting to enrich the lives of their students, and students saying they were bored with the curriculum as it was being presented.
So we, I think, are almost at the end of the journey, the story we wanted to tell. Here's some things that I think as a superintendent that I've observed that are really important. Knowing when to move fast and when you need to move slower. So we do something that we call rapid prototyping. We try to aim small, miss small, so that we put out there lots of opportunities for people to be inventors, and then we start to look at which of those ideas seem to be ones that are taking root and moving or not. We don't close down invention, but we do try to really scale across innovative ideas. But we try to do that as quickly as we can so that we don't spend 5 years doing strategic work, and by the time we get to the end of the planning process, the world's already moved on. We also really encourage all of our people to be what we call ADD visionaries, where they're watching, observing, and multitasking attention. So when I walk into a classroom and I take a look at what's going around, I'm looking at how the technology is being used. I look at what the kids are doing. I look at how the teachers are interacting with kids. Are the teachers at the dominant teaching wall, or are they moving around? Are the kids working more collaboratively? Do they have opportunities for independence? So really taking a look at all the ways that the classroom can be looked at by teachers, by principals, by me, by kids, and using that to really inform up what needs to change here or not. We encourage our teachers to do what we call grand rounds through both lesson study kind of work as well as learning walks that our administrators do together, our teachers do together, and sometimes our principals and teachers do together. And I think that most importantly is that modeling across the organization that getting to yes is the critical way that you build community and empower people to be the inventors, designers, and engineers of education. I don't think we have to look out to the corporate world to do that for us. I think we have plenty of amazingly talented people inside our systems that are able to do that work if they're released and empowered to do it.
And, you know, I think we have went too fast there, but a whole range that when you do this kind of work, you know, the liberation starts to spread through the system in so many ways. You know, rethinking what a writing classroom might look like in this case. Rethinking what summer school looks like, which we did recently by using last summer and we'll do again as Maker Summer, where all the curriculum for summer school kids is driven by making. This was so successful that we ended up with more kids at the end of the summer school period than we started with. People started voluntarily showing up for summer school. We end up rethinking how we accept stuff. So in this picture, the librarian said to these boys, you either have to take your shoes off or not be lying on the couch because I don't want your shoes on the couch. So the boys solved the problem by putting pillows under their feet so the shoes wouldn't touch the couch. And the librarian wasn't frustrated with this. She was so proud of it, she texted this out to everybody. We like kids to invent their own ways, to find their own comfort in things. All across, our teachers have adjusted the heights of standard tables and no-cost solution to give choice to things just because they figured ways to make kids more comfortable. And we'll add in links going on in a minute that we sort of lost in the way this was said. But what we wanted to take you through was sort of our journey to that getting to yes, to getting to a new kind of educational paradigm that stops looking to 1850 and 1900 as the way to educate our young people, but starts instead to look toward the future and what they need.
So absolutely, I think that where we started was that our goal is that we really do have that sort of democratization of our classrooms where kids are given choices. If you want to stand up to do your artwork in this class, you stand up. If you want to sit on the floor, more Asian style, that's fine too. That what it does is it really teaches our kids a level of inner directiveness and self-independence, self-awareness that I think is the hallmark of what great citizens do, what great family members do, and what great people do when they're on the job. And so what we really have tried to do is to look at how is it that we empower our learners to have those choices and to get coached over time into the work they do, as well as with our teachers, rather than seeing our world as one in which we are building everything around the rules of what you can and can't do. So that's really, I think, a part of the Maker work that we've built out. And I would just say that for me, there's nothing more important than having Maker leaders in our schools and recognizing that although I sit at the top of what you might consider to be the organizational chart as superintendent, the reality is that I like to think that Michael Thornton and Erica Thorson and Joan and Ackroyd and all of the educators across the system have just as much at stake as I do and have just as much to offer as I do. And I'm just one of them, happens to have a different title and a different job in terms of the work I do, but I'm no more important than a teacher who's a first-year teacher that has a great idea that's going to make a difference for young people. And that's just the way that we try to work here.
So thank you for being with us this morning, and change something in your school today. That's what we always say. Change just one thing and get started.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Pam. I really appreciate this. You really have your arrows aligned as far as transforming the school culture and really making these maker leaders, as you put it. So thanks again. And are there any questions or comments for Pam and Ira before we begin our breakout sessions, which do begin at 8 o'clock? Please go ahead and type your questions in the chat. And again, it's a remarkable presentation and great things you're doing out there, and we hope we can come visit sometime back from us in California. Because living in the Silicon Valley, we hope to see a lot of stuff happening, and we really see it happening all over the country, not just here in California. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, as you
all know the School Leadership Summit has begun, and if you check the schedule at schoolleadershipsummit.com, you can check out the many breakout sessions that will begin momentarily. So thanks again, and thanks to our wonderful keynote presenters this morning, Ira Socol and Pam Moran. Please go ahead and log out, and we will go ahead and archive this recording shortly.